感谢您的配合。
Welcome to the 23rd International Conference on the Theory and Practice of the Teachings of Dharma Master Inshun. The opening ceremony will begin at 9 a.m. Please take your seat and turn off your cell phone or set it to silent mode. Please don't bring any food or drinks into the 慈云 Hall. Thanks for your cooperation.
大会备有同步传译机，如果有需要的贵宾，请您到服务台以身份证件换取，并于今日议程结束后归还传译机，领回证件。
In addition, you may get an interpreter machine with your ID card or any other identification document at the service desk. It will be returned after you give the machine back.
为了让这次会议留下珍贵的历史画面，待开幕典礼结束后，约9点30分，我们将在慈鱼厅外的广场合影留念。
After the end of the opening ceremony at 9:30 a.m., we will take a group photo outside the building.
请各位来宾往中间的座位移动，这样拍照起来比较好看。来，往中间移动，谢谢你们的配合。来，请两侧的贵宾，我们往中间的座椅移动。第23届印顺导师思想之理论与实践国际学术会议佛教与当代动物伦理开幕典礼，典礼开始。
The opening ceremony will now begin.
大众请起立，
Please stand up.
主席请就位。唱三宝歌。 向佛陀圣像行三问讯礼。
Paying homage to this Buddha.
一问讯，再问讯，三问讯，向应顺导师法相行三问讯礼。
Paying respect to Master In Shun.
一问讯，再问讯，三问讯。大众请坐下。
Please take your seat.
首先，我们恭请玄奘大学简少奇校长致辞。
Now we will welcome the president of Shenzhen University, Mr. Jian Shaoqi, to give us a speech.
曹院长，Professor Peter Singer， 张董事长，还有我们赖主任，我们台下的与会的专家学者，还有与会的贵宾，大家早安。早哈，很欢迎大家一大早就到玄奘大学来做客。那应顺导师思想的研讨会每年都举办。 那今年回到玄奘大学来办理，很高兴大家来到这边。那今天有很多的议题，我看了一下，这里面的相关的议题讨论，包括还有一些圆桌会议的讨论哈，还有 Peter Singer 教授的新书的发表。我想这些议题也都跟佛教紧紧相扣哈，包括我们会谈到一些动物的议题。 我刚刚也跟台下的一些专家学者也讨论这个议题哈，我想这个是对我们这研讨会的一个多元，还有这个相关的这议题讨论呢非常的丰富哈。再次感谢欢迎大家来到玄奘大学，也祝福今天的研讨会顺利圆满，谢谢大家，谢谢。
感谢简校长致辞。
Thank you, Mr. Jian.
接下来，我们欢迎远道而来的普林斯顿大学荣誉退休生物伦理学教授 Professor Peter Singer 为我们致辞。
Now we will welcome the Emeritus Professor of Bioethics, Princeton University, Dr. Peter Singer, to give us a speech.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here. I'm not sure, are we having the speech? No, but we have the slides. So we need the slides then if I'm giving the talk, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you. So I'm very pleased to be here. I want to thank the president of the university for welcoming me. I want to thank, of course, Venerable Shi Chao Wei for the contact that we have had over many years, and I'm very pleased that it has been renewed again. As you know, we have had a long dialogue discussing secular utilitarianism and Buddhism, and I think this has been very fruitful. We'll be talking about that later this afternoon. So I'm looking forward very much to this conference and to the discussion we will have. Thank you.
感谢 Professor Peter Singer。
Thank you, Professor Peter Singer.
接下来，我们欢迎中华民国关怀生命协会张章德理事长为我们致辞。
Now we will welcome the chairman, Mr. Zhang Zhangde, Life Conservation Association, to give us a speech.
赵伟法师、简校长、Peter Singer 教授、赖主任，各位在座贵宾，大家好。关怀生命协会很荣幸能够参与这一次的国际研讨会，那么也欢迎各位贵宾的光临，感谢各个主持人、发表人以及所有志工同仁的参与与支持。那么我们非常期待这一次发表会的精彩的议题讨论及发表。那么衷心祝福大会圆满成功，谢谢各位。
感谢张理事长的祝福。接下来，我们欢迎慈济慈善基金会文史处赖瑞麟主任为我们致辞。
Now we'll welcome the director Lai Ruiling, 慈济 Charity Foundation, to give us a speech.
亲爱的教会法师、简校长、Professor Singer， 还有我们的张董事长，还有各位老师们、同学们，先预祝老师们还有法师们教师节快乐。何日升副执行长因为有工作的关系有药物在身，今天没有办法来。那也特别利用这个场合，向所有的师长和同学正在关心我们花莲光复灾害的每一个问候，好，给予最真诚的感恩。我的办公室也是在花莲，就是在金社。那我和我的同仁，我们周4的时候也去灾区挖了一整天泥那平常打键盘的手都在打字，突然去挖泥显得很不中用到今天2天了，手还在酸不过请大家放心，从今天开始，全台湾的慈济有1500到2000个志工会到灾区。那更要感恩全台湾很多的爱心人士，我相信我们在这次的灾害一定会很快的再站起来。我在今天呢，这个很高兴能够参加印顺导师研讨会。慈济是在第19届的时候我们开始协办，那在20届的时候开始一起合办，真的是要感谢教会法师还有所有老师给我们的指导，让我们从很门外汉，然后慢慢的一起跟着大家，每一次的主题选择，每一篇的论文，都成为我们成长的养料，也让我们可以秉承着导师给予上人的为佛教为众生，让我们可以继续的努力。那明年呢是慈济的60年，会回到慈济主办所以呢也要再诚挚的邀请好所有的师长们也能够来到慈济，让我们略尽地主之谊。好，感恩各位，感恩。
感谢赖主任的莅临。
Thank you, Director Lai.
接下来，请大会主席昭慧法师致赠礼物给 Professor Peter Singer。
Professor Singer, we will present you a gift.
Please.
感谢法师及教授。我们是不是请昭慧法师跟我们开箱介绍一下礼物的内容，满足一下我们的好奇心？
喂，好吧，临时给我出招这个是非常有名的钱塘轩活瓷杯，这是台湾的特产然后它带有一种这个华人文化的特色，是因为这个活瓷的本身它带了很大的将水分子减小，然后对整个身体的这个正能量的流动有帮助，这样的一个功能，而不只是一个水杯而已。那么这一次的选购的这个活瓷杯呢，又更有一个特色，就是它其实是来自于故宫博物院所馆藏的一些兽面纹饰然后呢用青花釉的这个色彩来把它套上去的所以它又兼有了我们这个华人古文明的一些这个遗留的文化遗产的特色那我们这个我们知道辛格教授跟他的夫人都是 vegan， 都是非常严格的素食者，而且他们非常喜欢我们的这个华人的食物包括台湾的，还有中国大陆的川菜等等所以呢，他虽然是身为一个西方人，但他很有这个广大平等的世界观而且能够欣赏各种不同的文化。那么，所以不但只是一个杯子的小小心意，其实也代表着我们礼赞他的开阔的心胸，以及多元文化共存的共识。谢谢。
感谢昭慧法师详细的介绍。 接下来进行玄奘大学台湾佛教研究中心。
Hello
没牌。我们恭请大会主席昭慧法师是最后致辞，典礼结束之后致辞。
所以还有一些
最后，好，我们接下来进行玄奘大学台湾佛教研究中心优良硕士论文讲助颁奖典礼。
Now we'll move on to the Master Thesis Award ceremony of the Center for the Study of Buddhism in Taiwan.
首先请硕士论文特优获奖人释天弘上台领奖。
Venerable Shi Tianhong, please be on your mark.
这个奖项，我们请玄奘大学简少奇校长颁赠奖金及奖状。
We'll invite the President of Shenzhen University, Mr. Jian Shaoqi, to present the Distinction Award of Master Thesis to Venerable Shi Tianhong.
感谢简校长，要不要带领？接下来，请硕士论文优等获奖人崔菊芬居士上台。因为崔居士今天有要事未能莅临现场，我们请陈月轩老师带领这个奖项。我们恭请大会主席昭慧法师颁赠奖金及奖状。
Ms. Cui Jufen, please be on your mark, and we'll invite the convener, Venerable Zhao Hui, to give the award to Cui Jufen, recipient of the Outstanding Master Thesis Award.
感谢法师。接着介绍大会与会贵宾。
Welcome our guests.
欢迎来自海外远道而来的贵宾。
Of foreign guests.
瑞典隆德大学大众传播学系托比亚斯林奈主任。
Dr. Tobias Linen, Head of Department of Communication, Lund University, Sweden.
来自马来西亚拉曼大学中文系副教授兼金宝校区系主任杜忠全副教授。
Dr. Du Zhongquan, Head of Department of Utah.
来自斯里兰卡凯拉尼亚大学巴利语与佛教研究所佛教学系的Wadinagala Panaloka 博士。
Dr. Wadinagala Panaloka, Department of Buddhist Thought, Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies, University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka.
接着欢迎国内的贵宾，佛教弘誓学院住持星浩法师。
Venerable Xin Hao, Abbas, Buddhist Hongshi College.
佛教弘誓学院院长赵亮法师。
Venerable Zhao Liang, Dean of Buddhist Hongshi College.
国立台湾师范大学历史学系主任吴有能教授。
Professor Wu Younen, Chair of Department of History, National Taiwan Normal University.
中央大学哲学研究所名誉教授李瑞全教授。
Emeritus Professor Li Ruichen, National Central University.
国立政治大学宗教研究所所长李玉珍教授。
Professor Li Yuzhen.
国立成功大学中国文学系林朝成教授。
Professor Lin Chaocheng.
国立台南大学国语文学系邱敏杰教授。
Professor Qiu Mingjie, Department of Chinese Language and Literature, National University of Tainan.
前国史馆修纂处处长侯坤侯教授。
Former Director, Department of Preservation and General Service, Academia Historica, Professor Hou Kunhong.
国立台中教育大学语文教育系彭雅玲教授。
Professor 彭雅玲 Department of Language and Literacy Education, National Taichung University of Education.
玄奘大学宗教与文化学系荣誉客座教授黄运喜教授。
Emeritus Professor 黄运喜 Department of Religion and Culture, 宣章 University.
玄奘大学宗教与文化学系汉学研究中心黄慧英副研究员。
Professor 黄慧英 Associate Research, the Center for the Study of Sinology, Department of Religion and Culture, 宣章 University.
树德科技大学通识教育学院特约研究员黄文树教授。
Professor 黄文树 College of General Education, 树德 University.
国立成功大学中国文学系叶海燕教授。
Professor 叶海燕 Department of Chinese Literature, National 成功 University.
佛光大学健康乐活暨管理学院荣誉讲座教授兼校务顾问蔡笃坚教授。
Professor 蔡笃坚 佛光 University.
台湾警察专科学校蔡瑞麟教授。
Professor 蔡瑞麟 Taiwan Police Academy.
法古文理学院佛教学系邓伟仁主任。
Dr. 邓伟仁 Chair, Department of Buddhist Studies, Dharma Drum Institute of Liberal Arts.
辅仁大学英国语文学系张黎文副教授。
Dr. 张黎文 Department of English Language and Literature, 辅仁 Catholic University.
慈济大学宗教与人文研究所戴爱莲副教授。
Dr. Dividu, Institute of Religion and Humanities, Buddhist 慈济 University.
国立政治大学华人宗教研究中心研究学者刘宇光教授。
Dr. 刘宇光 Center for the Study of Chinese Religions, National 真知 University.
财团法人严宽户文教基金会叶瑞琪理事长。
Chairperson 叶瑞琪严宽户 Culture and Educational Foundation.
最后，让我们欢迎大会主席昭慧法师为我们致辞。
We will invite the convener, Venerable Zhao Hui, to give us a speech.
Respectable Professor Peter Singer and dear LCA Pre-President 张章德前理事长and 慈济对瑞主任赖瑞麟主任校长and distinguished guests, because English is not my mother language, so I hope my speech is can fluently present my idea and my graceful to all of you. So now I will use Mandarin language to offer my speech. Okay. 我用这个蹩脚的英文呢讲的不是那么流利，所以为了节约大众的大会的时间呢，我还是直接用中文来表达我的致辞。首先呢，这个大会呢，已经延续了23届。那么我们的大会每一次的所冠的总标题呢，都是印顺导师思想的理论与实践。那么印顺导师呢，他是我的老师，他也是慈济正言法师的师父，所以作为正言法师的作为印顺导师的徒弟跟学生，我们分别为我们的和尚跟阿舍里我们轮流主持这个印顺导师思想理论跟实践的会议，这是非常有意义的一件事情。很感谢这几年慈济功德会全面的加入，减轻了我们的很大的负担，也增加了许多的伙伴们共同讨论印顺导师思想。那么为一位重要的哲人来举办思想研讨会，其实是对他最大的恭敬跟缅念的方式。因为每一个人的肉体可以腐朽，但是他的思想可以影响着数以万计亿计的人类，引领着他们这个冲决黑暗的网罗，迈向 光明的净土。因此，从这样的一个定位来说，我们举办23届的印顺导师思想研讨会，它的重要性就不言可喻。因为印顺导师确实是在整个保守跟充满着桃城避世的气氛，以及社会对佛教广大误解的背景下，冲决了黑暗的网络提出了引领大家迈向光明净土的非常睿智的思想，也就是人间佛教。那么他的人间佛教呢，不只是要救度广大苦难众生的慈善佛教，还有很大的意义呢，就是 engaged Buddhism， 也就是说介入社会事务，来让此时此地能够成为人间净土的一份理念。也因此呢，这样的一种思想呢，影响了慈济的证严法师，让慈济基金会、慈济的所有国际赈灾以及各种的苦难救度，成为全球佳话，甚至于慈济可以说是台湾进入联合国非政府组织的唯一的机构。那么他的思想呢，也影响着我。因此呢，我在台湾发起了从动保运动开始，一系列的包括佛门的女权运动、社会的女权LGBT 的平权运动乃至于最近所发起的抢救国库运动，这一系列的运动，当然因为是在抵抗跟这个纠正一些不正确的思想观念，以及努力取消这个社会许多不当的既得利益。那么这个当然就会引起很大的反弹跟辱骂，但是对我们而言呢，这是必经的过程，不需要有任何的惊讶的感觉。相反的我觉得这正是我们滋润我们的法身慧命的养料让我们真真正正的能够把自我放下把自我的尊严自我的怜惜等等的莫名其妙的情绪全部放下，完全用最纯净跟无私的心念来一步一步走向 engaged Buddhism。 那么所有这一切的功德呢，其实都根植于印顺导师思想的启蒙。也因为在这个脉络下，我们举行这个研讨会呢，是具足非常强大意义，不但是在社会上宣告我们的 engaged Buddhism 的理念，也包括了在佛教界正本清源、回归佛陀的原始思想。也就是说，佛陀本身是以身作则的，在引领着一系列的 engage 的，就是侧入世间、介入政治的行动包括在最危险的战场、最危险的战场，佛陀并不是只在讲反战，他是站到战场上去阻止侵略者，用他的肉身抵挡侵略者。那么这些行为呢，都被软弱的佛教徒所忽视。软弱的佛教徒一再告诉我们国家不需要有战备，因为反战的缘故。他们不知道，只有战备充足，才能够避免苍生浩劫。这是佛陀的启发，也是对我们今天的世人的一个启示。所以呢，在这个情况下，我们举办这个研讨会是具足了对人类和平前瞻性的一个洞见以及宣告。那么因此我就要讲到我最尊敬的 Peter Singer 教授。我们跟他结缘，也是在 engaged Buddhism 的理念下成立了这个关怀生命协会 LCA 而我的共同创办人张章德理事长现在就在这里出席，一向是我的亲密战友。那么我们呢，用佛法的护生理念侧入到动物保护台湾的动物保护运动，而且促成了台湾动物保护法的立法，以及野生动物保护法的修法，乃至于我们成功的促成了台湾的反赌场运动，避免台湾成为一个很大的赌博专区。那么像这些呢，都是在不断的挽救这个苍生的浩劫。而也在这样的脉络中呢，我们知道了这个 Peter Singer 教授在1975年就有一个经典性的名著，就是 Animal Liberation。也因为这样， 我们 LCA 觉得非常的可贵，于是征得他老人家的同意，把它翻译出来。那么这一份的结缘而后影响到了中国大陆，中国大陆也把我们的简体字转成繁体字出版，后来又自己正式出版。那么今天 Peter Singer 教授是第4次来到台湾，这次有3次曾经来玄奘大学，所以跟我们玄奘大学的因缘也非常非常的深刻。那么这次呢，他带来的是 Animal Liberation Now， 也就是说，这是动物解放这本书最后的定版。那么今天呢，在现场也有带来给大家，机会非常难得，主角在场这个如果想要请他签名的，记得等到今天的研讨会结束的时间，开放20分钟，让大家请Singer教授签名，千万不要错失这个机会。而且今天呢，不但上午Singer教授在发表这个 Animal Liberation Now， 而且下午呢还有一场座谈会，是台湾哲学界非常期盼的这个哲学界的前辈李瑞全教授交代我，能不能有一天Singer教授来的时候呢，让他这个针对Singer教授跟我合写的这本书能够做一些哲学界的问答。那么这个问答就精彩可期，那就不只是有关于动物伦理，还包括了人类的许许多多的生物科技，或者是生命的一些生命伦理的争议话题因此呢，今天整场的研讨会精彩可期。那我们也希望借由一种engage Buddhism 的精神，正好跟 Peter Singer 教授的心灵智慧的火光可以说是遥相呼应我们来共同努力的创造平等，没有迫害，没有剥削于任何物种、任何种族、任何性别的光明净土。谢谢。
感谢昭慧法师为我们介绍 Engage Buddhism 的精神与影响。感谢各位贵宾莅临，共襄盛会。开幕典礼到此圆满。
Thank you, Venerable Zhao Hui. We extend our appreciation to all participants for their engagement. The opening ceremony has come to an end.
礼成。新书发表会将于上午10点开始，请各位准时入座。
The book launch is scheduled for 10 a.m. Please be on time.
接下来进行团体合照，请各位来宾跟随志工们的引导，移驾至这栋大楼前的阶梯广场拍摄团体照，为这个难得的盛会留下珍贵的纪念。团体照的电子档放在佛教弘誓学院官网，请各位在会后自行下载，谢谢。
Now we'll take the group photo. Please follow the guidance of our volunteers. You can download the photo from the website of Hongshi College after the conference. We have arranged delicious refreshments, along with a showcase of publications. Please explore and enjoy these offerings after the group photo.
大会备有丰美的茶点招待以及主办单位的出版品展示，请各位来宾前往参观，谢谢。
我们到外面去。是他们交代的，没错。因为我完全没时间看。
讲啊，要跟他讲啊，先放那边，先放那边。
喂，麦克风有了，2号有了，
喂，
有了啦。
各位来宾您好，欢迎您的莅临。再一次温馨提醒您，请勿将饮料及食物带入会场，感谢您的配合。第23届印顺导师思想之理论与实践国际学术会议，佛教与当代动物伦理。在您进入会场的时候，请您带上您的名牌。在会议结束后，或是您需要中途离开会场时，请协助我们将名牌交回服务台。登记用餐的来宾，如果临时需要取消用餐，敬请协助通知报到处。感谢您的配合。新书发表会将于10点开始，请各位尽快入座。
Please ensure you have your name tag with you at all times. If you need to leave the symposium for any reason, please return your name tag to the registration desk. For participants who have registered for meals but need to cancel, please inform the registration desk. The book launch is scheduled for 10 a.m. Please be on time.
第23届印顺导师思想之理论与实践国际学术会议，佛教与当代动物伦理新书发表，现在开始。
The book launch of the 23rd International Conference on the Theory and Practice of the Teachings of Dharma Master Inshun will now begin.
那因为时间有限，所以我们这一场只进行新书发表的内容，讨论的时间我们就放到今天下午一并讨论。那我们很荣幸的邀请到国立台湾师范大学历史学系主任吴友能教授担任本场次的主持人，欢迎吴教授。
We now invite Professor Wu Younan, currently as the chair of Department of History, National Taiwan Normal University, to be the moderator for this session.
同时，我们也再一次欢迎本场次的新书发表人，普林斯顿大学荣誉退休生物伦理学教授 Professor Peter Singer。
And we welcome Professor Peter Singer, Emeritus Professor of Bioethics. Princeton University. He is the speaker for this session.
Thank you very much. Once again, it's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to launch the traditional Chinese edition of Animal Liberation Now. So what I want to do now is to present some of the ideas that are from the old edition and also from the new one. So here you see the cover of the 1975 edition, almost exactly 50 years ago, because it was published in September. This is the United States edition, the first edition you're seeing. And on the other side of the screen, you see the edition that is just been published now in Taiwan. Oops. So let's look at the situation in 1975 when the first edition of Animal Liberation was published. The animal movement faced many challenges at that time. So the first challenge really was to get people to take I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry.
因为天下没有白吃的午餐呢、我等一下我怕我没有主持，赵慧法师就要给我收午餐费啊，所以我就耽误大家几分钟哈。Now, okay, let me give my welcome speech, and the Honorable Professor Peter Singer, Venerable Master Zhao Hui, distinguished colleagues, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now, good morning, everyone. Well, it's a real honor and a great joy to welcome you to this special occasion, the launch of the Chinese translation of Professor Peter Singer's renowned work, Animal Liberation Now, the definitive classic renewal. Today is not just it's not about celebrating a book. It's about reflecting on our conscience, our compassion, and most importantly, the urging for action. Right? Almost 50 years ago, as Professor Peter Singer just mentioned, his work, Animal Liberation, changed the way people all over the world thought about animal and justice. With clarity and courage, he showed us that suffering of animals cannot be ignored if we want to call ourselves truly moral beings. That message has become more relevant with time when we heard about the news of suffering of human beings and non-human being as well. This new Chinese edition brings those ideas into today's world. It reminds us of progress, law in Europe and United States, but also tough realities, the threats of factory farming, the environmental cost of misconsumption, and the threat of new pandemic. Still, this is not a book of despair. It is a book of hope. It is a book of love. It points us towards products, practical solutions, plant-based diets, cruelty-free products, and sustainable living. It reminds us that philosophy isn't about only theory. It must move us to action now. This is what holding this launch here at Xuanzang University so meaningful. The university stands for compassion, wisdom, and social responsibility, social engagement, as Master Jiao Wei has pointed out. And we are deeply honored by the presence of Venerable Zhao Wei, whose scholarship and activism show us how moral vision, religious compassion can be turned into real change. Should bring about a lot of change in Taiwan and around the world, and that in Buddhism as well. Let's give a applause to Master Zhao Hui. This event also echoes the humanistic spirit of Master Inshun, who taught that Buddhism must face the suffering of the world directly. The Chinese translation of this book, celebrated here in Taiwan, reflects the Mahayana Buddhist ideal of combining wisdom and compassion to see suffering clearly and to act with courage to release it. Professor Singer, your work has shown us that animal liberation and human liberation are deeply intertwined and connected. Today's launch is not just a literary celebration, it's a call to conscience, a call to action for all of us. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Professor Peter Singer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ng, for that ringing endorsement, and especially for adding the call to action that you mentioned. I'm very glad that we didn't miss that, and I apologize for my confusion at the beginning. So, as I was saying, what are the challenges that we faced in 1975, and what are the challenges that we face today? So, whoops. If we go back to 1975, there was opposition to cruelty as such to animals. That was generally condemned, certainly in the countries that I'm most familiar with, like Australia, the United Kingdom, and generally European nations, as well as the United States. But it was still generally accepted that the interests of humans always override the interests of animals. And that was and remains a serious problem. Animal welfare at the time was seen as a rather conservative cause. Progressives tended to see it as a distraction from the more important issues, which they regarded as issues about human beings. And finally, the idea that animals would have rights or that they could be given equal consideration of their interests was met with ridicule at the time. It was simply not taken seriously. So that was an important challenge to overcome. And to attempt to overcome it, I drew on the concept of speciesism, which is a bias against other beings simply because of their species and is analogous to racism and sexism. I want to say I did not invent the term speciesism. It was invented by Richard Ryder, who is somebody who I knew in Oxford when I was a graduate student and when I started thinking about these ideas. But I used it in animal liberation, and I think it became widely used after the publication of Animal Liberation. The second challenge in 1975, and again still to some extent today, is making people aware of how the animals they eat are raised and treated in factory farms. This is something that I did not know about myself until about 1970, when through a chance acquaintance with a vegetarian, I learnt that the animals I was eating had been raised, in the case of chickens, like this. Maybe 10 or 20,000 birds crowded into a single shed with no thought given to the well-being of the individual chickens. They were simply a commodity. So what the animal movement needed to do was to try to enlighten people about this, to show them photos and videos of how the animals they were consuming were treated. Even the idea of being vegetarian or vegan was seen as very peculiar in the 1970s. Again, I'm speaking about Western countries particularly here. Vegetarians were generally seen as cranks, if you like, people with rather strange ideas. There were very few vegetarian or vegan products available in supermarkets and restaurants. Even the term vegan was not really understood at that time. And then, again, particularly in countries that had either a Jewish or Christian background, there was the problem of this verse of the book of Genesis, in which it said that God grants man dominion over all of the animals. And only man is made in the likeness of God. The animals are not. So that also was a challenge because many people were influenced by this idea to think that we can dominate animals, that we can do as we wish with them. Fortunately, this is something that much more recently the Roman Catholic Church has come to reconsider. And we should thank Pope Francis for having stated very clearly in a papal encyclical, Laudato Si, which is the highest, most important kind of document that a pope can issue. He has said that, acknowledged that Christians sometimes incorrectly interpreted the scriptures, and he says nowadays we must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures. So that is a significant step forward, at least for Christians and particularly for Roman Catholics, in how we think about animals. Let me talk a little bit now about some of the new challenges that we face and the continuing challenges that we must also deal with as we move onwards for the next 50 years of our concern advocating for a better world for animals. Whoops. So one problem is that we actually have more animals in factory farms now than we did in 1975, despite all the work that has gone into it and the growth of the animal movement in many countries. Let's just look at why we should focus, I believe, on the treatment of the animals we eat. We're going to hear in this conference about the treatment of laboratory animals, and that's a very important topic because that is quite a large number of animals when we think about it. Although we don't have really accurate estimates, something like 200 million vertebrate animals alone are killed for the purposes of research, in laboratory research. And that's a big number. But we need to compare it with the number of animals raised for food. This is a figure from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization for land-based vertebrate animals, and an estimate from a website called Fish Count for the number of fish raised in intensive aquaculture. It's approximately 200 billion. So, as I said, laboratory animal research is an important topic, but for every animal killed in laboratory research, 1,000 animals are raised and killed for food, for human food. And that is not including wild-caught fish. I'm talking only here of animals who we bring into existence and where we dominate every aspect of their life to produce them for food. Why has this number grown so much in the 50 years? Well, a large part of the answer to that question comes from this part of the world, from East Asia, and particularly the fact that East Asia is more prosperous than it was, China most particularly, and because these countries are more prosperous, people are buying more meat and other animal products, and that's been a big factor in the increase in the number of animals in factory farms, and I'll show you a bit more about that in a moment. So let's look, though, on the positive side, as Professor Ng said in his introduction, there is hope and there has been progress in 50 years, despite the depressing growth in the number of animals in factory farms. For example, one of the methods of producing meat that I wrote about in Animal Liberation, in the first edition, was keeping very young calves in individual stalls, like you see here, in order to produce veal, in order to produce very soft and pale meat from young calves, which fetched a high price. And to do that, the calves were taken from their mothers at a very early age and put in these narrow stalls where they lived for the rest of their lives, never coming out of those stalls until they were taken to slaughter. And in those stalls, they could not even turn around. The stalls were too narrow. The idea was to confine them so they do not develop muscles and the flesh remains pale and soft. And they were fed on a milk replacement product that was deliberately kept low in iron so that the flesh would be pale in colour and not the same red colour as beef. Well, that is no longer permitted in the European Union and in some other jurisdictions elsewhere. So we have made progress with that. Also, in the same countries where we have made progress with veal calves, that is the European Union, the United Kingdom, and to some extent, but not completely in the United States, this method of keeping the mother pigs in factory farms is no longer permitted. These are the female, the mothers, the sows who are pregnant. Their role in the industry is simply to produce more piglets, and then the piglets are taken away from them to be fattened and used for food, and the mother is made pregnant again, and she goes through this cycle several times. And whenever she's pregnant, she's kept like this in these stalls, which again, as you see, are too narrow for her to turn around. She can only stand up or lie down all day. And you can also see that there is no straw or any kind of comfortable bedding. The sows are just lying on metal slats. And that again is for economic reasons. It's cheaper. It's cheaper not to have to provide straw, which you would have to remove and get new straw now and again because it would become covered in manure and urine. So all you do with these metal slats is you hose them down and the manure has gone. So everything is done for the sake of producing a cheaper product. Nothing is done to enhance the welfare of the animals. And I was mentioning China before. Here you see this practice with the sow stalls in a pig production unit in China. You can see how enormous this is. The number of sows just vanishes into the distance. And many of these pig factories, because that's what they are, factories for producing pigs, are now multi-story. There's a 26-story pig factory in China, and more are being built, and some other countries in Asia are planning or considering building them as well, in Hong Kong and also in South Korea. These are the pigs who are actually sent to market, not the sows, also kept in very crowded, confined conditions, and essentially nothing for them to do all day except eat and just move a little bit in their stalls. Egg-laying hens. Again, there has been some progress here in the same countries the European Union, the United Kingdom, in California, this method of keeping hens in cages has been prohibited because it has been shown to be cruel. Veterinarians and other scientists agree that this is a cruel way to keep hens. The birds are so crowded inside the cages that they cannot even stretch their wings. And also because they're crowded, the weaker birds cannot get away from the stronger birds. And the stronger birds may peck at the weaker birds, may attack them. And in some cases, even when they do peck them and they draw blood, cannibalism will occur. The stronger birds will attack and kill the weaker bird and eat its flesh. If you can look closely, I don't know if the photo shows you sharply enough, but if you look at this bird here, her head is protruding out of the wire, you will see that she has a very short beak. And the reason she has a very short beak is because the pointy tip of the beak has been cut off. That is a very painful procedure in itself. The beak of a hen is full of nerves. It's, of course, the way the hen relates to her environment. Out in the open, she would be using her beak in a natural condition to find food, and it has nerves to detect whether what she has found is something that she can eat or perhaps a small pebble that she can't eat. So it's a very painful procedure to cut through the nerves of the beak, but it is routinely done on hens kept in this way in order to prevent them, as I said, pecking each other to death. So this also is, although it's banned in some countries, it is again standard in China. Once again, you see very large Chinese egg-producing factory, and the cages are all very crowded with hens. Some of them at the top, you can see, are trying to stick their heads through the wire, but what you are seeing is a place where there are tens of thousands of birds confined for their entire laying life. They're in these cages usually for a year, sometimes even a little bit longer, before their rate of laying eggs starts to decline. And once it declines, they will be taken out and slaughtered, and they will be replaced with new hens. And I want to come back to this photo of chicken meat production. Again, let me say, this is the way in which almost all the chickens produced for meat are reared. It's true you can find some that are not, and again, there may be some roaming around a village in a rural area, but I can tell you that in the United States, 99.8% of chickens are produced indoors like this. In other words, only 2 in every 1,000 chickens sold in the United States are not inside a shed like this. And I would assume that the figure is not very different here in Taiwan or in China or in most other industrialized countries. Now, I have this quotation here, perhaps you can read, from Professor John Webster, who is a veterinarian, a scientist, who has spent his life studying the welfare of farmed animals. And he founded a major centre at the University of Bristol in England for understanding the welfare of farmed animals. So why does he say that this is, of all the things that I've shown you, the most severe systematic example of man's inhumanity to another sentient animal? Well, one thing that you can see, obviously, is how crowded these birds are. You can't really see the floor. They're just filling the whole space. But there are other things that you can't see that concern Professor Webster. One of them is the selective breeding that has led to the chickens raised today that you see in this picture. So they have been bred to be very, very hungry and to eat a great deal, which leads them to put on weight very fast. So the chickens that you buy in a supermarket, if you buy chickens, are only 6 or 7 weeks old. They're really very young birds. Chickens live normally at least 7 years, sometimes longer. So they're very young birds, and they're much younger than the chickens who were being raised for meat even 50 years ago when animal liberation first appeared, because of this selective breeding. Now, there are a couple of important facts that result from this selective breeding and this very rapid weight gain. One is the birds have immature bones. Their bones have not had time to really mature and strengthen in the short time that they are raised. And yet they are very large birds. They are as large, they weigh as much as a bird twice or 3 times as old would have weighed in earlier times. And because of that, their legs struggle to support their weight. So Professor Webster has established that they are in pain for the last perhaps 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks at least, of their lives, because their legs don't really support them. He's compared it to somebody with arthritis in their legs being forced to stand up all day. And another consequence of this is that sometimes the bird's legs will collapse under them. They just break because of the weight of their body. Now that means the bird can no longer move. And if the bird, let's say one of these birds here, if that happened, they could not walk to where the food and water is. The food and water comes down these pipes through the shed. Would somebody notice that they could not walk? No. It doesn't pay to employ the labour to check all of these birds. So they will simply starve to death or die of dehydration. And this is accepted in the industry. If you look at the agricultural journals, you will see that it is accepted that about 5% of the birds will die before they're ready for market, even though they're very young birds. And that's just a cost. If you could, of course, avoid it by having birds who grew more slowly, but if you did, you would make less profit, even though maybe you would get a higher percentage of the birds surviving to market, but on the whole, because they took longer, you would make less profit. So that's another factor that is relevant here. I'll mention one more thing that you cannot see. As I said, these birds are bred to be very hungry and to put on weight very fast. They, however, are killed at an early age before they are sexually mature. So 95% of them anyway survive. But in order to have these birds, of course, you have to have parents. They have to have sexually mature parents who can breed. If you allowed the sexually mature parents to eat as much as they wished, only a very small percentage of them would survive, actually would live long enough to become sexually mature and to continue to breed and produce eggs that would hatch into chickens. So what do the producers do? Essentially, they keep the birds, the breeding birds I'm talking about now, they keep them on a semi-starvation diet. And literally, one standard practice is to feed them only every second day. So you have these birds who are bred to be very hungry and to put on weight fast, starved every second day. And it's obvious that they are searching for food, they are hungry, they drink a lot of water, but that doesn't satisfy their hunger. So it's another cost to the industry of this selective breeding, but because it pays, it is standard in the industry. So that, I think, is why this is perhaps the worst of the forms of factory farming that we have, although the others are also very bad. Just briefly, I want to mention that milk production has become more intensive as well. It used to be that the cows were outside in the fields. That may still exist on a small scale, but the big dairies now bring their cows indoors and do not allow them to roam around on grass. They feed them hay while they're producing milk. And the other thing I want to mention about the dairy industry is that cows, of course, like humans, do not produce milk unless they have recently given birth. So part of the dairy industry is separation of the calf from the mother at a very early age, within hours of birth. And cows, of course, are mammals. As you see here, the cows care for their calves. They suffer when the calves are removed. They call out for the calf for days afterwards, some cases even weeks afterwards. Of course, the calf, particularly the male calf, is either killed immediately or sold for veal, as I showed you. The female calf is likely to be raised as a dairy cow herself. And finally, I want to mention industrial fish production, which, as I said, is huge. Of those roughly 200 billion animals, vertebrate animals raised for food, something like 120 billion of them are fish. And a lot of that huge, high-scale production of fish for food, again, occurs in East Asia. It occurs in China, in Korea, and other Asian countries. So it's, again, a serious welfare problem which has been very much neglected. Okay, one area where we have made some progress that I want to talk about is understanding the sentience of non-human animals. The picture that you're seeing here is one of my favourites because this is an Australian bird. It's a sulphur-crested cockatoo. And sometime in the last few years, we have, the Australian local governments have introduced these large trash cans in which households put out their trash. The cockatoos are wild birds, but they have adapted quite well to living in the suburbs. The cockatoos have learnt that the bins with red lids contain food. The bins with yellow lids contain recycling plastics, so they're not interested in the bins with yellow lids. And they've also learnt to open these quite heavy lids, which is a bit of a skill. The bird has to stand on the edge of the bin, get their beaks under it, and then walk towards the side of the bin when the hinge is. And if they keep walking, the lid will fall down over the other side, and they can get into the bin and get some food. And scientists have documented the interesting phenomenon that this is clearly learned behaviour, because it begins in one particular place. You know, residents will start reporting to the council, hey, the cockatoos are getting at my rubbish and making a mess. And you can locate where this begins in any city, for instance, and then it spreads in concentric circles, wider and wider circles. It spreads in the area as the birds copy each other and find that they can get food that way. So, as I say, birds are more intelligent than we often give them credit for. I want to mention fish in particular because, as I just said, the largest number of factory farmed animals are fish. In 1975, there were quite a few people who said, oh, we shouldn't worry about fish, they can't feel pain, they're different from us. But there has now been good research done on the sentience of fish and their capacity to suffer. This is a book called Do Fish Feel Pain by a scientist who sadly died just a few years ago called Victoria Braithwaite. And this is Lynn Snedden, a scientist who's also worked with fish. And she states clearly here that the science has shown without doubt that fish are capable of suffering. And I think that is certainly true, that there has been good scientific work showing this capacity to suffer in many different ways. And if you're skeptical or you meet somebody who is skeptical, I suggest you refer them to the research, either the book by Victoria Braithwaite, or there are several articles published in leading scientific journals by Lynn Snedden. But we can even go beyond fish and beyond vertebrates. I have talked about the number of vertebrate animals raised for food, but we are now starting to learn more about invertebrates, and we certainly cannot assume that it is only vertebrate animals who are sentient beings. What you're seeing here on this side of the screen is the cover of a report, a review of the sentience in cephalopod mollusks and decapod crustaceans. Cephalopod mollusk you see here, the octopus, and perhaps many of you have already known about the sentience and the intelligence of octopus. There was a popular film called My Octopus Teacher, in which many people saw this. Octopus are very clever at solving puzzles of various kinds, and they have quite large brains. I think there's no question that they are conscious. And the decapod crustaceans are also, they include lobsters and crabs, and there's also good evidence that they feel pain. And in many countries, when lobsters and crabs are killed for food, they are dropped into boiling water, and I think there's no doubt that this causes them pain. It is not an instant death at all, and it causes them pain. And what I particularly want to point out about this report that I showed you the cover of in the last slide is that it is a fine example of how science and philosophy can come together, because it was produced by a team that combined scientists and philosophers at the London School of Economics, part of the University of London system, led by Professor Jonathan Birch, who is a philosopher. And interestingly, it had an almost immediate impact on legislation in the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom was just passing a law recognizing animals as sentient beings. The European Union has had such a law, or in fact it's part of the basic treaty of the European Union, and so when the United Kingdom was part of the European Union, animals had that legal status of sentient beings. So they were not things, and they were not human persons. They had a kind of intermediate legal status. But when the United Kingdom left the European Union, that no longer applied. So the animal welfare movement said, we should again have a law saying animals have the status of sentient beings. And the government agreed with that and brought in a law. When the law went to the House of Lords, the second chamber of the UK Parliament, the question was raised, well, what animals are we talking about? And previously in law, it had only been vertebrate animals who were recognised as sentient. But this report persuaded the House of Lords to amend the legislation to include cephalopods and decapod crustaceans, and the House of Commons accepted that amendment, and that is now the law in the United Kingdom. So I think we need to be more open-minded about some of the invertebrate animals as well, and where we can, we should give them the benefit of doubt and assume that because they may be sentient, we should not do things that will cause them to suffer. Now let me move on to a completely new challenge, just briefly, and that is the challenge of AI. There's a lot of discussion about AI, of course, and that includes discussion about the ethics of AI. We have seen that. We have seen that there was a lot of discussion, for example, about whether AI is biased against some groups of society, whether decisions it makes might be reflecting the biases of the information that the AI was programmed about. So, for example, in many countries there's been concern that AI may have a racist bias or a sexist bias. But what about the possibility that AI also has a speciesist bias? That field had been greatly neglected. I wrote an article together with Yip Phai Tsai, a Hong Kong-based researcher who had contacted me about the problem. And we wrote an article for this journal, AI and Ethics. And in our research for the article, we examined publicly made statements, whether by governments or by scientific bodies, about AI and ethics. And we found 72 statements like that. But at the time we wrote the article, none of them actually mentioned animals. They were all about AI and ethics for humans. Since then, there have been just 2 statements now that have mentioned animals, one issued by the government of Serbia and another issued by a conference in Montreal. But still, it's very much a neglected area. Now you might ask, well, what does AI have to do with animals? And the answer is, AI has quite a lot to do with animals in various ways. One obvious one is AI is programmed to run autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars. We may not have many fully autonomous vehicles on the road yet, but that's probably going to happen. So a question is, if the sensors on the AI detect a human being on the road, they are all programmed so that the car will stop or swerve and not hit the human being. But what if what they are detecting is a dog or a cat or a deer, or for Australians perhaps kangaroos? It happens that they get hit by cars. Or what about a smaller animal but not a domestic companion animal like a squirrel? So I think AI should take into account the interests of animals, including animals who are not companion animals. So that's one problem. Bigger problem is that AI is already being used in factory farms. What you see here is an AI-controlled robot in a chicken farm, but AI may have the potential to make factory farms cheaper to run and harder for alternatives to compete with, and it may enable producers to crowd animals even more if that's possible. If the AI can allow maximizing productivity. If it's programmed only to maximize productivity and profitability, then it may introduce even worse conditions than we have today. I'll also mention that if you want to look at the bias of AI, it's not difficult to do, because if you just ask AI a simple question like, what can I do with a dog? The AI will give you information about how you can look after the dog, how you can play with the dog and take care of the dog properly. If you ask an AI, what can I do with a chicken? The AI will give you recipes for cooking and eating the chicken, not for enhancing the well-being of the chicken. So that's another way in which we can try to encourage the people developing AI to think about animal welfare. All right, another interesting new challenge, which has some hopeful aspects, is the development of cultured meat. Cultured meat is meat created from the cells of animals. So no sentient being is actually created for that meat or killed for that meat. It is meat at the cellular level, but it is something that has been developed and grown, and it exists already, but on a small scale and at high cost. I have actually eaten cellular chicken in Singapore because Singapore was, I think, the first country to license the sale of cellular meat. I ate it in a restaurant. It was not available in supermarkets because the price they would have had to charge would have prevented anybody buying it. And I have to say I didn't find it particularly tasty, but I haven't eaten chicken for 50 years, so obviously I'm not an expert on whether it really tasted like chicken or not. But the challenge is to produce it in a way that meat eaters will consume. I'm not particularly interested in consuming cultured meat, but I would like people whose habit is to eat meat and who have so far not changed because of the ethical arguments, whether arguments about animal welfare or arguments about the environment and other impacts. I would like them to shift to cultured meat to reduce the suffering of animals in factory farms. That seems to me to be a promising alternative, but the challenges are firstly to reduce the price so it's economically competitive with meat from animals, and secondly to make it so tasty that meat eaters want to actually make this change. And if that could happen, it would be good for animals and also good for the environment. So I'm nearly finished now. Let me just come to my final slide, what I see as the challenge that is the most important challenge we face because of the huge number of animals who, as I've said, are suffering because of intensive animal production. It involves this enormous, you can barely think about, how can we imagine even 200 billion animals in factory farms? We can imagine the suffering of individuals, but to extrapolate that 200 billion times is probably beyond the capacities of human imagination. But it is a vast amount of suffering that is being inflicted on animals right now while we're talking. It also, some people will say we need to do this in order to produce enough food for the world. But that's a myth. Factory farming reduces the amount of food available for human beings. Because when we confine animals indoors, obviously we have to grow food and bring it to them. When animals are out grazing in the fields or on the plains, they eat grass. Cows anyway eat grass and things that we cannot eat and digest. So that does add to the availability of food for humans. But if we have to grow food for animals, we feed it to them, they use that food, or they use the part of the nutritional value of the food simply to keep their bodies warm and to live and breathe. We're talking about mammals and birds. They're warm-bodied animals mostly, not so much the fish, but they, in all cases, we get back only a small fraction of the food value of what we give to them. And there's now an enormous amount of grain that is being fed to animals and a huge amount of soybeans. In fact, the majority of the world's soybean crop is now fed to animals. It's not used for human consumption in the form of tofu or soy milk. The majority goes to animals where, again, we waste most of the food value of that very nutritious bean. So we would be better able to feed the world's population without factory farming. We also are increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Animals emit greenhouse gases, particularly the ruminant animals, so cows, including dairy cows, and beef cows, and sheep in particular, emit large amounts of greenhouse gases. And we can reduce that. The cultured meat production will reduce greenhouse gases, if it spreads, by something like 90%. Also, there is a public health risk. Actually, two public health risks. What I have on the slide is the risk of another pandemic, because it's clear that viruses can spread in the factory farm conditions, and we need to try to reduce that risk. if we go back to the pandemic before we had COVID-19, that was a swine flu pandemic, and it came out of factory farmed pigs. So we could easily get another pandemic out of factory farms. It could be as contagious as COVID, or even more so, but much more deadly. So there is a serious health risk from pandemics, from factory farms. And I'll also mention that many factory farms routinely feed antibiotics to animals. It seems to improve productivity, but this means we have lost the usefulness of some antibiotics, because the routine feeding of antibiotics to animals means that the bacteria, some strains of bacteria will develop that are multiply resistant to antibiotics, and hospitals have to deal with that problem all the time now. So, in my view, the animal movement's primary goal should be to focus on factory farming and to seek to reduce factory farming. I'm happy to leave you with that message. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Singer. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's panel, let me thank Professor Peter Singer, Venerable Master Zhao Wei, our speaker, and all of us being part of this meaningful event. Professor Singer has reminded us that of the enduring problems of animal suffering, while also pointing to new challenges of our time, including how technologies like AI intersect with animal welfare. His message is clear. These issues are not only matters of theory, but urgent call for action. Well, as you can see from my tie pin, I came back from Texas, because this is the tie pin with Longhorn. I talked to some of the farmers, actually, or dairy farmer there, and tried to have a very vivid conversation over cultured meat and other possibilities, such as, well, clean water and taking insect as alternative food in order to solve hunger problem worldwide. Now, it seems that it suggests that today's launch of animal liberation now shows us that philosophy, religions, and activism can work together to guide how we live, how we consume, and how we care for all being on this planet. Let's take this spirit of today's forest by reflecting and by engaging and by acting with wisdom and compassion. Of course, in good spirit of Professor Singer has suggested and remind us so much. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing this important journey together. And let's conclude this panel with a big applause to our speaker, Peter Singer.
我们感谢吴有能教授担任本场次的主持人，更感谢 Professor Peter Singer 跟我们分享西方世界对于友情的判准以及 AI 与伦理在动物面向的挑战。那我们这一场就到这里结束。
Thank you, Professor Wu, and special appreciation for Professor Singer for your enlightening speech.
接下来我们没有休息，就进行第一场的。我们先 Professor.
Let's take a photo together. Yes, please move to the front of the stage.
我们再次感谢两位学者。接下来我们要进行第一场论文发表会，主题是动物伦理。
Now it's time for the first symposium, Animal Ethics.
我们邀请到国立政治大学华人宗教研究中心研究学者刘宇光副教授担任本场次的主持人，欢迎刘教授。
We invite Dr. Liu Yuguang, Center for the Study of Chinese Religions, National Zhengzhi University, to be the moderator for this session.
同时，我们也欢迎本场次的论文发表人，慈济大学宗教与人文研究所戴爱莲副教授，瑞典隆德大学大众传播学系托比亚斯林奈主任。
And we also welcome the speakers, Dr. Elise N. DeVito, Associate Professor, Institute of Religion and Humanities, Buddhist Tsuji University, and Dr. Tobias Linne, Head of Department of Communication, Lund University, Sweden.
那我们欢迎刘教授开始今天这一场发表会。
The first symposium will now begin.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this section. In this section, we do have two outstanding colleagues and professors to share their research and observation about animal rights with us. And both of their articles is focused on somehow related to rat. 老鼠 and of course in our daily life we do have some kind of a stereotype about rats. It always associated with something like dirty, something like related to disease, and something disgusting. But back to a much more objective reality, rat exists on our earth for I guess tens of thousands of years and all the time here. And for human being, our wrong perception or our problematical perception about rats is might be not doing fair with them. Okay. Therefore, we do have two professors to provide their own research to share their opinion, their observation with us. The first of our speaker is Professor Elise DeVito, 戴爱莲教授. She is a professor in the Institute of Religion and Humanistic Studies, 慈济大学, Tsuji University. And in her article, she will talk about can a laboratory animal be a bodhisattva? Animal testing and research at a Buddhist university as a case studies. Yeah, please, Professor. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm trying to push it. How do we like? I want to switch the. Thank you very much, Liu Jiao. It's good to see you again. And thank you for. Let's see. Okay, good. Thank you, Venerable Zhao Hui, for inviting me. I'm very happy and honored to be here. And also, I must say that this is the first time I've studied anything to do with animals, and I'm really inspired by Venerable Zhao Hui's work and Professor Singer's work. And also thank you very much to Jeff Nicholson, I don't know where he is, but Ni Jiao Shou. It's also very important. Now, I only have 20 minutes, so most of the details I can't talk about, so please refer to the paper. And I'll just give you a brief introduction. So it was 1959 when the 3R principles, I'll be talking about that today, replacement, reduction, and refinement. Those were first proposed by British Russell and Birch. Then through 1960s legislation, then the breakthrough work of Professor Singer in 1975. Over the decades, scholars and activists have developed all kinds of arguments and action plans related to ethical problems of the laboratory animal industry. And today I'm not talking about any university. I'm talking about a Buddhist university that conducts animal research and those ethical concerns. So today I'll be focusing on, should a Buddhist university be doing animal research? Because Buddhists, their first precept is abstain from killing sentient beings. So this paper critiques the two major rationales offered by a Buddhist university in Taiwan to justify its animal testing and research center. The first rationale was offered by the university's founder, a Buddhist monastic, and this person regards laboratory animals as the appearance of the bodhisattva, who sacrifices his or her life to save people. And on the contrary, I will argue that neither the bodhisattva ideal, nor even examples of animal exemplars in the Jataka tales, can apply to laboratory animals due to the animals have no free will, and they cannot make vows. So I believe that they cannot be bodhisattvas. The second rationale I'll talk about is the laboratory animal center itself. So I had great interactions with the laboratory center people. They freely gave me their documents, and we had all kinds of email exchanges. But the laboratory animal center at this university says science and religion are separate. And I think we could even call it Stephen Jay Gould's concept of non-overlapping magisteria. It says they're separate truth regimes and they can talk, but basically we're doing science and those religions people are doing their religion. So basically the laboratory animal center's argument is as long as they adhere to domestic international laws, regulations and standards regarding laboratory animals, it is sufficient for them. But the problem is, once we bring in ethics, first of all, this center does not have a statement about ethics at all. They only have an SOP, standard operating procedure. So believe me, I read that SOP backwards and forwards. In the SOP, there is no talk about humane Ren Dao. But you have to go on their website, and I had to dig through their website and look at regulations and laws to find the word humane. Now, I will argue, or in this paper I argued, that this center violates fundamental Buddhist principles, including the protection of life, the first precept, the second precept, I'll explain. Also, the ethical conduct. Laboratory animal research violates right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So basically, I think that a Buddhist university should not be doing this. And I'll explain to you why. So the center was founded in 1998 to meet the needs of the university and affiliated hospitals. So in Chinese, I translate it, when animals must be utilized for scientific purposes. And the authenticity of the experimental results can be ensured as long as the entire process follows government regulations and the current humane spirit. But the problem is they never define what that is. Also to minimize the risk of hazards to the public. So that is this close, that's basically it's not even an ethical statement, it's just a preamble, right? So let me just tell you one thing, that last year, I have the data for last year, that this center housed mice, rats, hamsters, and zebrafish. And last year, researchers affiliated with the university and hospital used the animals for basic medical research, to develop medicines, and to develop health food products. So you say, oh, health food, it's so safe and healthy, but perhaps animals were killed for your health food. Last year, there was 94 research projects. They used 46,110 animals and fish. and most of them died just last year. So, okay, last year, it started in 1998, so you can do the math, right? Okay, so sorry, this is a typo. When the medical school was established in 1997, the founder said, my heart is struggling. It's difficult to make a decision because of the spirit of compassion in Buddhism, life is equal. Even a little mouse has a precious life and the right to survive. But it is said that the Bodhisattva will not hesitate to sacrifice his life in order to save people. So we must respect them and regard them as the appearance of the Bodhisattva. So there's a lot to unpack in the statement. I encourage you to read my paper. But so in other words, as long as the researchers vow to respect and are grateful to the animals, then the animal lives will be valuable. Now this is another problem. If the mouse is just killed with poison, the death of the mouse is useless. But now a lab animal has a destiny and can dedicate his body for research. So I also think this is problematic because I never heard in Buddhism that there's useless and useful lives. That's the first time I've heard about that. And also we should not be 太执着. They say there's no need to be 执着. We should just let it go. So there's a lot in this statement. This is the university founder. Sorry, it's 1997. There's a lot to unpack. So I looked at the Foguang University's Buddhist dictionary. A bodhisattva is a sentient being on the path, a sentient being who is awakened with the heart of the path. They already have, okay, so bodhisattva means, bodhi means awakening, wisdom. Sattva means a sentient being. And a person who seeks the supreme bodhi with wisdom, transforms sentient beings. I mean, you can read this. You should also be aware that you're benefiting yourself and others. So a lab animal, it will be hard. You're not benefiting yourself if you're a lab animal. You're suffering. And you also have great aspirations. A bodhisattva should have vows or aspirations. 要发愿嘛. Right? So, and anyway, the key factors of a bodhisattva, as I see it, are you have attained or strives for enlightenment. You generate vows to help others through compassion. You bring joy and remove suffering, right? You understand the paramitas. You practice, you're trying to benefit yourself and others. Now, since the Lotus Sutra says all sentient beings have the potential for enlightenment, we can't say it's impossible, but it's highly improbable that a non-human animal has this level of wisdom and compassion. You would have to understand the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. You would have to have some kind of self-consciousness to meet the definition of a bodhisattva, I think. Now, of course, we can talk about this. Also, the lab animals, okay, so in the Buddhist literature, there's Jataka tales. So the Buddha actually, in his previous lives, he was a rabbit, a swan, a deer, an elephant, a monkey, you can see a fish, and a naga, which is like this snake thing. But those animals, they definitely acted with wisdom and compassion. They were generous. There's also a story about Asanga, and he was Han Kuxing. He was meditating and practicing, and Maitreya appeared to him in the form of a dog. So there are these stories, and also there's other stories about an elephant who throws himself off a rock to rescue starving travelers. So there are these stories about animals saving people, but they are voluntary. They acted voluntarily. Someone said in the modern context, it is highly doubtful that any animal would march into a corporate research laboratory or volunteer to overdose on drugs. As we know, the laboratory animals are bred, they're inbred, outbred. You buy them online, you buy them from a company. They're programmed for the experiment you need, right? They give no consent to suffer and die. And even if they were bodhisattvas, it seems like they're doing this in vain because there's a high translation failure of animal-based human-directed research. That means there's a lot of animal research, but may not even be applicable to people, or it may, they may fail, or it doesn't translate over. Okay, so now the second rationale, science and religion are separate realms, because I had a lot of emails with the center. We use standards and norms of science, rationality. That's what we are rational and scientific. Okay, if you want to talk about humanistic, ren wen, we have friendly interaction with people, and we do our best to assist researchers. And they say, well, if you want to talk about humane and humanistic, so every 7th month, every year in the 7th lunar month, at this university, they have a gratitude and blessing ceremony, and that corresponds with Pudu, right? And so that's on the lunar calendar. It's when the ghosts come out and you give offerings to them to leave you alone. But what they're doing is, at the same time, they have a Pudu ceremony for the animals. So the center administration says this ceremony can somehow atone, can somehow, that's the religious part. Now, they said their center doesn't need to really talk about ethics or religion. Okay, so, and I said, well, why doesn't the SOP talk about any kind of ethics? They said it's a rigid operating procedure. We can't really talk about Buddhism in the SOP. Okay. So, and he said, sure, okay. But then I asked him again, I said, so your center has no Buddhist values? And they said, well, okay, if you want humanistic and humane Buddhist values, we abide by the laws and regulations, the 3 R's, and the 5 freedoms. And we had that gratitude and blessing ceremony. So I think his argument is sort of very muddled, I think. And so I went through all these things. There's no time to talk about all the laws and regulations, but I will talk about the 5 freedoms and the 3 R's. Well, first of all, this center does not have a clear statement of any sort of ethics, and it's certainly not in line with Buddhist ethics. And on the one hand, we can stop here because no killing is the first precept of Buddhism. Master Yin Shun and Master Jia Hui. Protection of life is the foundation of Buddhist ethics. And in Chinese Buddhism, Hu Sheng, Jie Sha, Fang Sheng, I mean, that's basic Chinese Buddhism, right? But in the center on the website, they often talk about Ren Dao, humane. And so I hear humane. Now, in the SOP, there's no talk about humane. They just say, why are we doing this? The repeatability of the experiment, free from environmental pollution, in line with the current, again, humane spirit, but we don't know what that is. There is no definition of current humane spirit in the SOP. You will find humane talked about it in these various laws, which I can't talk about, Animal Protection Act. There's all kinds of guidelines that talk about humane. There's also the 5 freedoms of animal welfare, but that was actually originally developed with regard to the livestock husbandry. So the 5 freedoms actually, originally it was for raising animals, as Professor Singer just showed us. So freedom from thirst, hunger, and malnutrition, freedom from fear and distress. You can see them. Discomfort, exposure, pain, injury, disease, freedom to express normal behavior. I think this came out in the 70s or 80s. I forgot when. But that didn't really, okay, the laboratory setting, very hard. The laboratory setting, they're in small cages, they're in small stacked cages. They are subjected on purpose to pain and disease. At times, food and water is withheld for them for the experimental results. And lab animals are usually killed at the end. They're killed. So this doesn't really, I mean, you can talk about the 5 freedoms, but it's not going to really help you, right? And so the other thing is we say, oh, the 3 R's, maybe that's going to help us. But when the Russell and Burt's, I can't really talk too much about this, but when they developed it, they said this is actually not an ethics per se. This is it's a new kind of applied science. We want to improve scientific results, and trying to minimize suffering of animals, but but the point is to increase the results of the experiment. So replacement, substitute conscious living higher animals for for other types of materials, maybe computers, computer programs. Reduction in the numbers of animals, R. Refinement means try to be less cruel, basically. Refinement. So the 3 R's, and that's the basic of all labs, but now we have to know, what do they mean by humane? Don't think humane means compassionate, benevolent. No. It just means less painful. It just means less painful. Less painful. So inhumane is extremely painful. Humane is less painful. And how do you know? Because there's all these scales of pain. So scientists subjected animals to pain and fish. All this proof that, and they have scale, how to know a fish is in pain, how to know a terrestrial animal, there's a rat pain assessment scale. And so there's it's basically calculi of pain. And so we know that fish have pain, and then what Russell and Birch hope you do is to less pain. That's all. It's not to be kind to the animals or anything, it's just less painful. Okay. Now, there's a lot of problem, that was just the bell, but worthy and less worthy lives, that probably cannot be, I can't accept that because we protect life and all beings are sentient. And the ends don't justify the means. I mean, there is a story about the Buddha in his previous life. He killed a robber to prevent that robber from stealing and killing 500 merchants. But that's like, the Buddha knew that robber was going to do it, and it's a very special case anyway. And also, it's supposed to, you shouldn't kill innocent beings just to help other people. That's not a really good justification, okay? And we're not supposed to be attached. The founder said, okay, there's suffering, but we shouldn't be too attached to it. But the lab animals die, they're gassed at the end by CO2. They're overdose of barbiturates, they break their neck, behead them, they behead the animals with animal guillotines. Oh, that's the end of it, but there's a lot of harm, so I'll just stop here. You can read my paper. I believe all this violates the first and second precepts, the right speech, right action, right livelihood. And I believe this is humane washing. If you hear humane, you know something is bad going on. And also there's a problem with Ren Dao. So basically, I recommend that the university develop a roadmap to abolish the animal center. Professor Venerable Zhao Hui has told us many times from bioethics, this is not tenable. And until they can abolish it, they have to at least define the term humane and create a clear and consistent code of ethics. Because only then can this Buddhist organization in all their practices be on the same page, because they promote environmental protection, vegetarianism, and really hold true to the protection of life ethics. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for Professor's presentation. In fact, when I read this article, at the second half of the article, it's talk about the animal turned out is beheaded. And I was really shocked by that. Before that, I don't know how the laboratory handle animal in this way. Okay. Now, for our second speaker, Professor Tobias Linda from University of Lund, which is in Sweden. Okay. And Professor will present the paper under the title of Learning to Live with Rats, how we live together on the same earth with the rats. Okay. Professor, in fact, was trained in sociology in all of his 3 degrees, and afterward, he once became a visiting professor in China, in New Zealand, and some other cities, and his research is focused on animal ethics and some other ethical issues related to society. Okay. And different from the first paper, this paper is talking about the rats not in the laboratory, but the rats in the campus, in the university campus, and also in the urban area, which is much more close to our daily life for each of us. And let's see how Professor share his observation. Yeah, yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah. No problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your patience and thank you for waiting. Thank you so much. I want to start by thanking you all for this beautiful arrangement here, this conference. This is my first time to Taiwan and my first time at a Buddhist conference. So it's been a very special experience for me. So thank you all. And especially thank you for my lifelong inspiration, Peter Singer, and my new inspiration, Shisha Wei, who I think is doing so much wonderful work for animals. So thank you both. And last, to Professor Jeffrey Nicolaisen for basically bringing me here. He's the reason why I was able to come here. So thank you, Professor Ni. As was said, I'm from Lund University in Sweden. Just very show you a map of it. You can see Sweden here, and this is the very south of Sweden. So actually, closer to Denmark. And Lund University is one of Sweden's oldest universities, the second oldest, and the biggest university in Sweden. And here are some pictures from Lund. But I'm not here to talk about Lund. I'm here to talk about rats. And so rats are very close to my heart. As you can see, I'm wearing some rats on my T-shirt today. It started with me, my daughter actually wanting pet rats. So that's how I got involved with that. Then I started working with this organization called Råtthjälpen, which is translated into rat rescue, helping rats, which is a Swedish organization that rehomes abandoned pet rats. So I feel listening to this morning's introductory speaks about engaged Buddhism, which is a new concept for me, but I feel it resonates very much with me and the way that I approach my scholarship, because I believe that we as academics have a responsibility, to not just do theory and do things within academia, but also try to affect the outside world. And of course that goes for everyone, but especially for those of us who work with animal issues. So I have some pet rats at home, in my own home. Here's 3 of them sharing my breakfast. So yeah, so these are 3 rescued ones, 3 girls. They're all sisters. But I could talk about them too, but again, that's not why I'm here today. So today I want to talk about the brown rat, Rattus norvegicus. It's its Latin name. It's actually a misnomer because the British guy who named them thought they came on a ship from Norway. So that's why they called it Norwegian rat. But that's actually, they're not from Norway at all. Instead, they're believed to have originated in northern China, Mongolia, and then spread westward over centuries. So they reached Europe, like some disputed, but they reached Europe in the early 18th century. There were more common reports about them. And at that time, there was already another species of rat in Europe, the black rat, Rattus rattus, which is smaller than the brown rat and more suitable for warmer climates. So basically what happened then in Europe, today there are very few places where you can find black rats in Europe because they were simply outcompeted by these brown rats who are a bit larger and also more adapted to colder climates. And the brown rat is basically spread all over the world to this day. There are, some few places, Antarctica and very remote, and you can see that's the province of Alberta in Canada, who claims to be rat-free, the only rat-free province in North America. They have a very extensive extermination program for keeping rats out of their province. And the reason for that is because of Alberta is a big agricultural province, and rats are seen as a threat to agriculture and the profits of agriculture. So I think brown rats are very interesting for several reasons. So my field of study is human animal studies or critical animal studies. And in this field, we are interested, so I'm not a philosopher, even though I deal a lot with animal issues. I'm a sociologist by training. And us sociologists, are interested in social relations. But for a very long time, the study of sociology was just about social relations between humans. But I think all of us know here that it's definitely possible for humans to have social relations with animals. Of course, they're different than those we have with other humans, but they definitely have a social aspect to them. So this is the way that I approach human-rat relations, as social relations that play out in different ways, and that's why I want to study them. And when I present this to my students, I teach about human-animal studies. This is often how I sort of present, what the purpose of our field, human animal studies, is, to acknowledge the importance of other species of animals in the creation of our human societies, our culture and histories, as well as our roles in creating and sometimes destroying theirs. So what I want to talk to a little more in specific here about today is a project that I finished actually this spring, where I did 18 qualitative, so sort of longer 1 hour, 2 hour interviews with people in my hometown of Lund who sort of frequented areas where there are a lot of rats. So I wanted to ask them about their feelings, their experiences of these brown rats in the city environment. And these were the two questions that sort of was guiding my research. So as you can tell, I'm very interested in promoting a less violent attitude to these brown rats. And in order to do so, I'm trying to understand basically why do people hate rats so much? Because a lot of people really hate rats. And as you know, in popular culture, they're often seen as, maybe one of the worst animals around. And I truly think that is not fair. So I want to try to understand, what would it mean to view rats not as urban pests, but as sort of co-inhabitants with a right to exist in these spaces that we call our cities. And then sort of to talk to this more engaged thing, to think about what changes could be, what measures could be taken for people to accept rats as part of the cities. Because I think one peculiar thing about the brown rat is that they are not wild animals in the normal sense that we talk about wild animals. They don't live, in faraway places, in forests. So, there is no way that we sort of can protect brown rat habitats or brown rat as animals. And they're not either domesticated animals. Some of them are, obviously, the ones I have at home, but the brown rats that we see in cities are not domesticated. So they have this sort of in-between status. So the majority of the world's brown rats today, their natural habitat is among humans. It is in the cities and around where humans live. They follow us, and so they have followed us, and that's how they spread across the world. They traveled on human ships, on trains, etc. And they want to live with us. That's what they thrive of. That's what they do best. And when you think of it, it's kind of almost a bit sad, that they seek us up and we hate them so much. So the story of the rat goes, and the rat-human relations, and the very sort of hard, violent rat-human relations goes a long way back. These are just some images. This is an image from the Middle Ages of the saint. I can't remember her name, but she's the patron of cats. So, and you can see, so cats were used to, to kill off rats, and this is just an image to show, the association between rats, at least in Western culture, to darkness, to disease, to sorcery, and to a lot of negative things. And rats have had this association for a very long time. We know the Black Plague, which that was not the brown rat, that was the black rat, has been accused of spreading, which, during recent years, many scientists have sort of toned down the role of the black rat in that. And of course, at that time, people didn't understand, bacteria or the disease. So the association of rats with dirtiness and, decay and all of these things is actually a more modern phenomenon. It starts becoming, rats starts becoming associated with these kind of things, dirt, disease, etc. Not until the 19th century, with urbanization and people moving into the cities and finding their way into the cities. At this time, rats were more despised because for the Catholic Church, They symbolized, you know, they have a remarkable capacity to reproduce. They also is one of the few larger mammals that don't form stable familial bonds. So they're quite promiscuous, both the females and the males. So they can have many different partners. And so that was a reason for the Catholic Church, you know, to not like the rats. And we can see here, this is an old Gertrude Job's famous mythology, Dictionary of Mythology from 1967, I believe. She lists the common associations of rats with death, desertion, destruction, enmity, informing, major troubles, renegade, sneak. And then she, at the end, she says in China called Shu, yeah, and symbolizes industry, prosperity, also meanness, timidity. So obviously, I'm speaking from a Western perspective, but I'm very interested in learning more about the rat in non-Western cultures. And so please, if you have any information about that, please talk to me. So this, there is a great book by a scholar named Jonathan Burt called simply Rat, where he traces the cultural and social history of rats. And he calls them modernity's totem animal, sort of a symbol of a dark modernity. And he has this very powerful quote that I'm not going to read out, but where he, you know, talks about how they follow humans everywhere, and how they were also, you know, how they appear in humanity's darkest moments. So for example, this is a picture from World War I, where, and the trenches and the trench warfare, you know, the soldiers dig in the ground, and they had a lot of rat infestations. And so sort of they come, you know, at the darkest times of humans in the wars. And interestingly, in the war following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has also been a lot of reports about rat infestations. And there are many ways of, you know, trying to answer why is the rat so despised today. And one perspective that I'm particularly like is, you know, the ones that point to how the rat is a transgressor, you know, transgressing human boundaries in different ways. So this is, again, from Alberta, the Canadian state that I told you about from the 50s. And you can see you can't ignore the rat. He's a menace to health. He carries germs home. He destroys property and industry. He causes waste. And this is another similar poster that I got from a scholar that I met just last week in Kaohsiung for a Korean anti-rat campaign. But I believe, like, this idea that the rat's status as a transgressor, you know, literally transgressor, getting into the homes, gnawing, you know, their way, eating up cables and all of this, you know, destroying the houses, but also as a symbolic transgressor, you know, reminding people of the dirt and, you know, all the old things that our modern and clean society is built on. So I think I have a little more time, so then I will go a little into the study that I'm doing. So this is an aerial map of my university and a few of the buildings, and this is also very much frequented by students. It's quite central in the city of Lund, and these are different departments. And here in this area, we also have quite a large rat population, and I've been following the rats and trying to documenting some of the pictures here are of these rats. And here they have a big nest in this tree that I studied right before I left. So in this city of Lund, like many other Swedish cities, we have a so-called rat problem. And last year, this is from a newspaper, the city council declared a war on rats under the name The Party is Over. And this is the mayor of Lund saying that they have become more numerous, larger, and increasingly fearless. I have been contacted by several Lund residents that say there is a rat invasion, that it has increased explosively. And yes, there are quite a lot of rats in Lund. I've never heard a report of anyone getting hurt or bitten or, otherwise, attacked by a rat. I think that definitely can happen, but I would say it's very, very rare. Because like most animals, wild animals, rats shy away from humans. They prefer to live under our streets than be on our streets. But the rats are definitely more visible in the city environment than they were maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So this is what I interviewed my interviewees about, and these are just some of the quotes. So one thing that many of the interviewees mention, is this having an uneasy feeling when they see rats. So this is quite a typical example. This is a university employee talking about how she goes to work and seeing them mostly in the mornings because that's when they're active. It's still a bit dark and they move fast across the pavement. I don't know. There's just something about them that give me the chills. And here's another informant talking about their experience saying, oh, it's not like I'm terrified or anything, but I get this reaction like a little jolt in my stomach. It's like an instinctive thing. And I just want to mention, like a lot of people talk about their tails. They're actually not hairless, but they look hairless. And that's a big source of, disgust for a lot of people, the rats' tails. Here's another where I talk about how they are, unpredictable, moving fast. And I think we can see this in relation to a lot of animals. Like people don't like animals that sort of move fast and, are uncontrollable. So again, this idea that, nature is to be controlled and animals should be controlled by humans. This is another quote, which I think shows, how rats also are interpreted as a city in decay. So a lot of the interviewees, when they talked about rats, were also sort of directing critique against the politicians because when they see rats, they seem to think, something is not right with the city governance. There are just too many now. They're not shy anymore. You can see them in broad daylight. I don't think you can ever get rid of them completely, but something has to be done. We can't just let it go on like this. And I think this is also significant of how there is sort of a dilemma here, because this person recognizes, that you can't get rid of them, not by exterminating them. And that's true. They will come back. I mean, you can get rid of them for a short time, but then they will reappear or in another place. But I think it also shows, the dilemma that, or the problems that people have of imagining a different way of dealing with it. So if we cannot get rid of them despite all these extermination efforts, then what do we do? What do we do with them? And my answer to that is coexistence. Oops. So I think it is possible. I do believe it's possible, and I am positive about it, despite how hard rats are treated. But with familiarity, with observation, and with a recognition of animal agency, I believe it is possible to get people to respect rats and learn to live with them. And I think we need some kind of multi-species education, like education in the broader sense, that prepares us for coexisting with rats. Because rats are going to get more common as we get more urbanized, and the rat population of the world is projected to grow a lot, actually, in the coming 20 years. Another important suggestion is some sort of denizenship for rats that, give them secure residency, fair chance of reciprocity, and anti-stigma protection from humans. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting article about rats. In fact, like in Hinduism, they do have a tradition to perceive rat as a transfiguration of one of their gods. And if you check like on the YouTube under the title Rat Temple Hinduism, you'll come up with a lot of very interesting pieces there. I think I pretty much agree with you that our perception about rat, in certain extent, is culturally based, related to how it associates with the folklore, how it related to the culture, and with different perception. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now we still have 10 minutes, and I would like to share the time with all of you, and looking forward for questions to赖文先生，对吧？ Yeah, please.
For Dr. DeVito Dailian, I have a very silly but fundamental question for you. In today's technology, is it possible to measure the pain of animals?
Yes.
Because to my knowledge, pain is a kind of a qualia, and we cannot measure qualia, and qualia is not shareable. So how can we measure pain? Yeah.
By causing pain to them and seeing their reaction. I mean, they're not going to say, ow, I hurt, but so they have, because I didn't have enough time, but those scales, those tables, it's like, okay, how do we know a fish is in pain? Okay, they get pale, their eyes are milky, you know, they sink to the bottom of the water. So obviously the animals cannot say it, but it's all external observation of the clues that they're in pain. Now whether, you know, so I'm not saying that this is right, this is what the scientists use. So they have that scale of pain. You know, usually the listless, cannot move around, the ears are down. Usually the ears should be up if they're down, or there's all these signs, right? And then, so that's just how they do it. And then the point is to move away from that, but not to end it, just to move away, yeah.
I mean, like, so, I mean, this scale is totally based on behaviorism, right?
Right, just observation, yep.
So, I mean, like, fundamentally, we cannot know he or her is in pain. Subjective is yeah.
Oops, this is for Peter Singer.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they, you know.
Subjectively, we cannot know, right?
Help, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I would say, like, if we apply that, then if we draw that to the end, then we wouldn't be able to imagine another human being in pain either. So I think we are living beings just like them, and we have a lot in common, like genetically, and so I think it would be very reasonable to imagine that they maybe not feel this pain the same way, but they want to avoid pain just like us.
So, like, we use the analogy to understand other animals, like, something like that, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. 赵卫法师 please.
戴莲教授的论文其实非常有趣。这个佛教大学其实我们都很熟。那我应该要从更宏观的叙事来看这件事情。也就是说，他们所提出来的理由并不合理。哦 ，sorry, translation is no clear. Yeah. She can listen. Yeah. OK. 我不认为他们所提出来的理由是合理的。比如说，为了人道啦，然后呢说这些动物被牺牲表示他们是波利萨的那个我是觉得不合理。那但是从更宏观的叙事就是说，这其实就是西方在理性主义抬头的主流文化之中所带出来的非常严重的问题。因为从西方的哲学家笛卡尔开始就已经强调动物其实是没有感觉的机器而已。那所以呢，他们对于动物彻底的工具化。那今天的Peter Singer 教授呢，他在他的新书发表会上比较大篇幅的都是在谈那些经济动物在这个在一种工厂化的农场中所遇到的苦难。其实它的 Animal Liberation 的另外一个很重要的主题就是实验动物，而且这个实验动物受到的残忍待遇绝对不亚于经济动物。那么所以呢，整个而言呢，其实是人类思想发生了一个重大的错误，就是把动物工具化， 认定动物是没有感觉的机器，然后理所当然的把动物工具化，而且呢，假借这些动物的牺牲可以带来人类福祉的理由，毫无禁忌的大量屠杀实验动物。那么，因此呢，我现在要回到谈这个 university 的问题。其实这个大学呢，它其实有附属医院。我们先要了解这一点，就是说它其实是有附属医院的。那么，所以附属医院里面的医师呢，他在进行许多的实验的时候呢，对的，就是因为这个全球的 SOP 作业，他们必须要做这些事情，否则他们的医院的整个的合理性可能会全面被推翻。我觉得这才是一个最严重的问题。也就是说，今天其实是一个系统性的暴力。它促使了一个最怜悯动物的佛教大学，竟然在非常不得已必须要维护它的医院跟医学院的合理性的基础上，咬着牙接受说有所谓的动物实验这个事实，这个是其实是一个最大的悲剧。那么其实呢，我们应该是要正本溯源，不但是所谓的3R 运动，我们彻底要推翻的就是。其实动物跟人类，许多动物，尤其是这种这个啮齿类的动物，跟人类之间的基因其实有很大的差异。因此，许多的动物实验上成功没有问题的药物，到最后去证明在人类身上会发生重大的问题。在啮齿类动物身上，觉得有问题的一些实验呢，其实在人类的身上却没有问题。也就是说，它是。不同的种类的动物，不同的这不是种族，物种，因此它的动物实验的所谓的真正带来人类福利这件事情，其实是要打问号的。也就是说，这样的一个过程其实是不合理的。你想想看，在西方过去的医学也好，或者是中国传统医学、西藏传统医学、印度传统医学，从来没有动物实验，可是为什么救了那么多的生命？包括人类的生命，因为他们从来不是用动物实验证明他们的医疗或者他们的医疗技术或者他们的药物是有效的，他们用别的途径来证明。因此，这些别的途径应该要被非常的正视，而它是一个非常政治的议题 ，It's a political issue。而且它涉及到非常庞大的既得利益，它必须是要我们非常努力的继续奋斗。这就是为什么我非常支持 Peter Singer 教授他的 Animal Liberation 的宗旨的原因。
好，谢谢 ，Thank you. We still have 5 minutes. Therefore, at least able to have the first questions. Professor William, yeah, 有能。
Thank you. I have a question for Professor Tobias Lind, and thank you for the very inspiring and interesting rat presentation. Now, my question for you is, how do you define home, and how do you define domestic, home and domestic? Now, because the definition of home shaped whether you regard mice as cohabitants rather than intruders. Now, if we extend this perspective, do you think that, well, we should also see flies, cockroach, and others as co-residents of the same space? Now, we talk about home, we use different terminology to describe home, such as the, in a more extended consideration, we also take our community as our home. We see the city as hometown, home city, home country. So because the definition seems to me to be unclear, so what you have argued is not so as rigorous as I see it. Could you help us to understand how do you interpret what is meant by home? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great question, and I can definitely see the importance of defining home, and I can also see that I need to do some work with that, because I think you raise a very good question. I just want to, before going here, I was talking to a friend, and I was talking about, this coexisting with rats, and she's from China. She lived in Xiamen, and she told me, oh, but you know, there are so many cockroaches in Taiwan, she said. And she knows I'm a little, you know, uneasy about the cockroaches because we don't have them in Sweden, so I'm just not used to them. And she was teasing me, you know, oh, so you're going to coexist with the cockroaches in Taiwan? I haven't seen anyone, at least. But, so yeah, I think to answer your question, do I see that those species also belong home? Yeah, I do. I've focused on rats now, but and that's probably for you know, reasons that they are easier to relate to. They're mammals, and you know, we can mirror ourselves in them easier than in a cockroach. But I think by extension, yeah, these kind of insects also follow us and, you know, make our home their home. And I mean, it sounds utopic in a way, I think, to many people. I mean, I think you're not laughing at me here, but we are in a very special place here. But if I would go, when I go to the city council in Lund and talk about, you know, coexisting with rats, I actually don't think they take me all that seriously. But I think we need, you know, utopian visions for the future. And I think this vision about multi-species communities, which I'm just, you know, learning to read more about, and not, of course, not only in relation to rats, but in relation to a lot of other animals, is the way forward for the future. And I think there's something fundamental, you know, that I think we need to start with, and that is seeing the urban space where, you know, most of the world's population today live in, not as an exclusively human space, but as a space where there are a lot of other animals living. And we know that, of course, there are animals everywhere on our streets. And I mean, another example are pigeons, who, you know, we had domesticated and, you know, used a lot, and then they're not in use for those reasons anymore. But I think that is the fundamental shift where we need to start, to not view the city as only for humans, but for a lot of other beings. And then it seems that we can accept some other beings in our cities. So some birds we are pretty okay with. Other birds, like pigeons again, we're not so okay with. And other animals like rats are sort of not okay at all. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. So our times are up. And then thank you so much for two professors' inspiring article. And also thank you for your attention. And it's time for us to have our lunch. Yeah, thank you.
好，我们再次掌声感谢这个场次的主持人以及两位发表人。
Thank you, Dr. Liu, and special appreciation to Dr. DeVito and Dr. Line for your enlightening speeches.
那我们请发表人跟主持人到台前拍照。
We will take a photo for three of you, so please move to the front of the stage.
好，那么当学者们在拍照的时候，我先插播一个好消息，就是我们Professor Peter Singer 呢，他会在今天的圆桌论坛结束之后为读者签名。那要签名就要有书嘛，对不对？哈。那还没有书的朋友们呢，我们现在在门口这个法界出版社有贩售，那有需要的同学有需要的朋友可以去外面购买。那接下来是午餐时间，大会备有丰富美味的素食餐点来招待大家，请各位来宾移驾至2楼广场，或者是3楼328、329教室，以及4楼428、429教室用餐，谢谢。
Now it's lunchtime. We have arranged delicious vegetarian meals for all participants. Please make your way to the second floor atrium or third floor rooms 328 and 329, as well as fourth floor rooms 428, 429, and 430. Thank you.
再复述一遍到2楼。